Imagine you're standing in the Wyoming darkness, the wild prairie winds battering your face, when suddenly, boom! The night erupts in a blast of dynamite and flying debris. Sound is swallowed by the explosion, replaced with ringing in your ears, the smell of burnt powder, and a sickening wave of grit and smoke rolling over you. The thunderclap rattles not just the train, but your bones, your legs tremble, your heart races, and splinters of shattered wood zip past. In the chaos, coins and shards of glass spray through the air. You try to see, but your eyes sting from the acrid haze. You can barely hear your own breath, much less make out the shouts of the men beside you. For a split second, you have no idea whether you're the robber or the robbed. This is not the slick Hollywood caper. It's confusion, violence, and the stench of dynamite everywhere. Your body telling you that survival is suddenly the only thing that matters. Before this night became legend, Butch Cassidy already loomed large in the American imagination. He was the face of the gentleman bandit, the outlaw with a smile, rumored to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, and allegedly quick with a joke as often as a gun. In dime novels and later in movies, Cassidy is painted as the clever, almost charming ringleader, a Robin Hood in spurs, robbing the rich railroads but never harming the everyday folk. That legacy has stuck. The Wild Bunch, his gang, are remembered as criminal celebrities, the anti-heroes of a lawless West. But the reality of their train robberies, what it actually felt like in the thick of it, rarely matches the myth. The real Wild Bunch was far from a group of slapdash desperados. Cassidy and his crew were skilled, meticulous, and focused on logistics as much as bravado. Before any robbery, they spent days scouting the route, plotting escape trails, and stashing fresh horses along their getaway path. They studied the train schedules, calculated where authorities would respond from, and even planned for contingencies like broken horseshoes or misfiring explosives. Their preparation was almost military in its precision, extra dynamite, ropes, lanterns, and enough food to last them through a chase. The Wilcox job, one of their most famous, wasn't made up on the fly. It was the result of careful planning, practice roles, and a cold calculation of risk. As the overland flyer approached, the Wild Bunch took up their positions along the railroad just outside Wilcox. They weren't hiding in the brush on a whim. They were exactly where they needed to be, in the dark, with guns at the ready and dynamite in their hands. The train's whistle cut through the night, steam billowing as it slowed for a signal that Cassidy's men had rigged. Horses stamped nervously in the background, sensing the tension, just as the men did. With every moment the train drew closer, the Wild Bunch tensed for the coming chaos, their boots pressed into the gravel, breaths visible in the cool air. Knowing that in seconds their meticulously rehearsed plan would explode into violent reality, the moment the train finally came to a grinding halt, the physical reality hit like a punch. Imagine the cold, real, biting Wyoming wind cutting through whatever coat you had, stinging your skin and burning your lungs with every breath. The iron rails trembled with just-stop momentum, steam hissing and swirling around boots on gravel. For the Wild Bunch, every sense was on high alert, the metallic taste of adrenaline in your mouth, the jitter of fear running through your hands, and the deafening noise as they fired a warning shot to let everyone know this was no ordinary holdup. Most accounts of the Wilcox train heist describe a chaos that's hard to picture. Yelling, cursing, the bark of orders. and the frantic scramble as the train crew and terrified passengers were herded out into the dark. Every outlaw felt their heart in their throat, every sense pulled tight by the fear of a gunfight breaking out or the plan failing in seconds. Even for seasoned outlaws, the cold, the noise, and the sheer volume of moving bodies and shouted threats would have made the scene feel barely under control. A knife-edge rush that was more physical ordeal than romantic adventure. But the real technical snag came when they faced the safe. This wasn't just a heavy box, it was a state-of-the-art, double-walled, railroad safe, designed to resist exactly this kind of attack. According to direct accounts of the Wilcox job, the gang's first attempt to force it open failed completely. No amount of prying or hammering would budge the thing, and time was bleeding away fast with every minute the crew stayed stuck on the line. The Wild Bunch were experts, but they'd met their match in this iron beast, a problem that called for their most desperate solution: dynamite. This is where things went from tense to truly hazardous, with explosives as the only way forward. Butch Cassidy was the one who made the call. With lawmen potentially closing in and the safe refusing to budge, he decided to use a far more dangerous amount of dynamite than any railroad would have recommended. The choice wasn't reckless bravado, it was necessity, pure and simple. Cassidy's decision to pack that much dynamite around the safe was a calculated risk, fully aware that it could cause as much harm as good. The amount used was so excessive, even modern historians blink at the reported figures. But without it, the safe would stay shut, and the whole night would collapse into failure. So, the Wild Bunch braced themselves, quickly cleared the car, and prepared for a blast that might solve their problem or blow the loot and the car sky high. When the dynamite finally went off, the result was even more explosive than the Wild Bunch intended. According to period newspaper reports and narrator accounts, the detonation rocked the train with a shockwave that could be felt hundreds of yards away. The baggage car erupted in a spray of splintered wood, smoke, and flying metal. In the chaos, money, actual bills, and coins shot through the air alongside hunks of debris. The explosion didn't just crack the safe, it ripped the baggage car apart, sending shockwaves down the track and across the open prairie. Men ducked and flinched as bits of the train rained down, and for a few horrific seconds, there was nothing but ringing ears, clouds of black powder, and the unmistakable smell of burning wood and scorched metal. The immediate aftermath was utter confusion. Money scattered, some of it nearly destroyed, and the outlaws themselves left staggering through a sudden, choking fog of their own making. The moment after the dynamite blast was not the triumphant moment you'd expect from a Hollywood heist. Based on what we know about the physical effects of dynamite and period accounts, it's plausible that nearly everyone, outlaws and train crew alike, found themselves reeling. The Wild Bunch and the stunned crew staggered through smoke with their ears ringing, some half-deaf, struggling to get their bearings. The explosion's shockwave wasn't just a noise. It slammed into people's bodies, leaving bruises and an all-consuming confusion. Breathing in the aftermath meant sucking down grit and black powder, coughing as you tried to figure out which way was up. For a few long, disorienting moments, the only thing louder than the blast was the rush of blood and panic in your own ear. That moment was chaos, pure and simple. Grounding this in plausible sensory aftermath, the air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of explosives, making every breath a struggle. Coughs and shouts echoed through the haze. Splinters and fragments littered the floor, and in the confusion, it was easy to trip, fall, or worse. Period accounts make it clear. Panic reigned. Gang members, some coughing violently, fumbled for money strewn among debris, their hands shaking either from adrenaline or the aftershock. Crewmen scrambled, some half-blinded by smoke, all terrified of another explosion or of a stray bullet. The raw risk of brutal injury was everywhere. A single step could mean landing on a red-hot metal fragment or catching a face full of smoldering dust. The risk wasn't just hypothetical, either. In moments like these, you could get burned, cut, or even hit by a chunk of the baggage car as easily as by a bullet. But the pain and confusion didn't slow down the clock. Reports from the period confirm what was at stake. The explosion and gunfire quickly alerted lawmen in nearby towns. The sound carried for miles on the prairie wind, and telegraphs snapped out urgent alarms. Every second, the odds of a posse arriving grew more real. The gang knew that any delay, whether caused by ringing ears or just plain shock, could be deadly. The escape countdown had begun, but they were still breathing smoke and blinking through tears, all while the law was already on its way. So the wild bunch scrambled, lurching through wreckage, coughing, some half-deaf, some likely sporting fresh bruises or minor injuries. They made for their horses and the open prairie. This wasn't an organized retreat. It was a desperate scramble, described as likely by period reporting and medical inference. The confusion wasn't limited to the outlaws either. The train crew, battered and stunned, could barely give chase or raise a coherent alarm. For a moment, no one, not lawman, trainman, or outlaw, could tell exactly who was in charge. The only certainty was that Cassidy's gang had to vanish into the wild before the next round of danger arrived. But even after the gang broke away from the train and vanished into the open land, the ordeal was far from over. The physical toll of the heist didn't just disappear once they were in the saddle. The prairie wind lashed their faces, stinging in cuts and burns. Some men may have been limping from bruises or moving stiffly where dynamite had burned their hands or faces. The ringing in their ears turned the night into a blur, and it was hard to tell who was shouting, if anyone shouted at all. The relentless wind didn't help. It sucked away any sense of safety, chilling sweat and smoke deep into every layer of clothing. The escape was slower, clumsier, and more painful than the legends ever admit. Here's the brutal payoff. The true cost of a train robbery wasn't just whether you got away with the loot, or even if you outran the law. The real bill was paid in permanent scars, burns from dynamite, battered limbs, hearing loss that might never fade, and a pain that didn't care one bit about the outlaw myth. There are no outlaw memoirs describing it in detail, but period accounts and medical context suggest that surviving a blast like that meant carrying a reminder for years, maybe for life. Not every Wild Bunch member walked away with the same wounds, but the odds of escaping completely unscathed were vanishingly small. The movies might show a triumphant gallop into the sunset, but in reality, most outlaws rode off hurting, forever changed by what had happened during those few minutes of chaos. So let's be clear. The mythic outlaw glory, the dashing legends, the cinematic swagger, the grinning photo ops is hollow compared to what really happened. The misery, the risk, and the physical punishment left by each heist far outweighed any sense of movie-style triumph. You didn't just gamble with jail or a bullet, you gambled with your body, your hearing, and the way you'd carry pain for the rest of your life. If you've ever watched a Western and thought, that looks like a wild adventure, just know the reality was much messier, more painful, and far less glamorous. In the end, every legend you've ever heard about Butch Cassidy and his wild bunch masks a history of bruises, burns, and basic, desperate survival. It wasn't swagger that got 'em through. It was stubbornness, grit, and the ability to keep moving with injuries that might have floored anyone else. When you strip away the stories and the sepia photos, what's left is a string of men whose bodies paid the price for every dollar stolen, every blast set off, every escape onto the prairie wind. Next time you hear about a legendary crime, try to picture it with all its real bodily cost, the ringing ears, the scorched skin, the pain that lingers long after the newspapers have moved on. The myth might promise glamour, but the truth is written in bruises, and every outlaw paid for their legend one wound at a time,